coming in this morning to talk about the things that I heard today. um, I was hearing about Christian white males are what they're looking for in the the DNC, the Democratic Party. That's the idea that they're floating amongst leadership and amongst the donors and stuff. Christian white male, that's a Republican. Full stop. That's the patriarchy. Full stop. That's specifically specifically the people who are doing the thing right now. Again, the Democratic Party is trying to bridge the gap between white people and white people. White people are clearly represented, not their interests, but their facade, their meat suit. You know what I'm saying? That's the visual dynamic that's been created in America. But that's not the people. We keep we keep rallying around organizations. I personally have a feeling that when you are no longer referred to as yourself, you know what I'm saying? When I mean, I always hear the bulwark specifically talking to Dems. Dems, what are you doing? Dems do this, Dems are this, and then they break off stereotype, stereotype, stereotype. Um, they're talking to Dems. Dems are too big. You know what I mean? If you can't name them, or if when you're naming Dems, you only get one or two names and it's a collective of people, hey, Tig was shaking. um, when you have people that are too many, that they're no longer being named by name, that's a problem. You know what I mean? That's kind of what the Constitution covers when it says the people, the ones. What I'm talking about is, why are the Democrats picking everybody else to leave out? I mean, it's easy to say that's the way the system's built. What I'm saying is, the reason that this administration was able to just pop in was because they already had the organization, they already had the hierarchy, they already had the structure, they already had the funding. You know what I'm saying? It's ridiculous in a sense that when you study the bad guy, you learn how to create your own function, because the bad guy is the people that go on the exploit, and overdoing the exploit is what creates an unnatural balance. you know Kitty, come on, buddy. Cats never pay attention to me. That's what I've been thinking about. I keep thinking about, I'm just going to read you out loud, Tick. I get your frustration at the perspective bias and all of this. It's hard because the bad guys learned how to organize from the good guys. Yeah, but Tick, what I think is kind of neat, and this is, I always think about Gangstar for some reason when I hear the word flip the script. I think it was like one of the first times I heard it was when Guru said it in his monotone drone. Um, but that's kind of the script flip. I study hard on Steve Bannon. I mean, not he himself, his content, but his structure and what he does. I mean, even on the same token, I think about the Midas Touch. That whole organization, they spent so much time looking at the Trump mechanism of grift that they kind of picked it clean of all the Republican stuff, and they kind of just started adding their progressive perspective. I'm starting to see it like a perspective, in the sense that it's a perspective, whereas the media they take in, yeah. But hey, Tig, reading it out loud, they learned the methods and then convinced an entire generation post Reagan era America. Yeah, I wrote a piece about that. They don't talk about the white vote because they don't frame the polls around looking at white people. They break them down to the wine moms, the soccer moms, the blue collar, you know what I mean, the college educated, the affluent, the um, suburban. They break it down to that. What they don't realize is there is no national at all. Yeah, yeah. I'm a big wrestling fan. You know what I mean? I can bounce between the wrestling cultures, and I see the wrestling cultures. Hyperbolic, sensational mind effing. Effing. Well, talking about the reading it, how the mob backed union strikes in the 70s alongside the civil rights movement. Right now, we're run by the Russian mob. America is run by the Russian mob. They don't understand the pride that's in our stuff because we're watching, we're covering, Donald Trump and all this stuff. We're naming the people who aren't in charge. You know what I mean? The people who are in charge are the ones who are doing the stuff, and the ones that are doing the stuff, no one's talking about because they're 3 and 4 levels down. When one conversation has to say, "Hey, just go do the thing, just go do the thing," and then one guy hands it down to another guy, and this shit gets done. That has nothing to do with the people that we're talking about. When I'm listening to the Midas Touch, when I'm listening to Crooked, when I'm listening to the Bulwark, those are really specifically my critiques because MS now, if it's on TV, it is part of a completely different product. But I'm talking YouTube, I'm talking Substack. Now that I'm thinking about that, my problem with the way that Midas Crooked Bulwark framed their stuff is they frame it within the context of the kayfabe. I watch wrestling. I watch wrestling. I know the I know the difference between WWE, AEW, TNA. There's a dynamic of of storyline of narration within each, and that's when I'm listening to them talk. They're speaking within the kayfabe of the White House. You know what I mean? Yes, they're on the outside, but they aren't the fourth wall breakers. We need fourth wall breakers. Man, wherever I was spinning, I don't know. I just wanted to stay on that point, I guess. But we aren't we aren't getting we aren't getting what we need. We need a Deadpool. We need a Deadpool news person who is just saying the thing. And what is a Deadpool? Donald Trump is a Deadpool. You know what I mean? And he's more like when Deadpool's crazy. So the more I've been reading and thinking about Donald Trump, he's not the guy. He's Epstein's operation, and I'm starting to see him as the dynamic where he's the nexus. But he was. I look at it like if you know Goodfellas, like mob movies. He was a made man. Like the more I hear about the victims and stuff like that, and they are afraid of specifically Donald Trump. He was a made man. I just made a comment, and I actually still have it looked up. Um, and I think it was Ellie Leonard that made a post about it, and my comment was on that. It's like Chickamauga. You know what I mean? He's just this innocent. When I say innocent, meaning not involved, this innocent walking in front of this mob, and he doesn't realize that as he's leading these destroyed and wilted souls. You know what I'm saying? As he's leading them, he doesn't realize there's a bigger bad guy way behind him, way behind him, or maybe he does, but he's still Chickamauga because he's marching in front of defeated souls, and now he's bringing us with it. Reading it, Tig. Mistaking the mob for the oligarchy. The mob of any culture were always working class from beginning to end, but post Reagan and tough on crime crackdowns in the 80s, whether that be shows like Law and Order or The Sopranos that romanticized the whole thing when really organized crime, they were talking about, boop, they were talking about it for ages, was really just the community organizing, making sure people didn't go hungry or become homeless, home, home, where's there's a number in there. The strikes were going on. Homeless, thank you, Tay. Um, yes, yes, that on a global scale, we're not driving the bus at all. You know what I mean? Jared Kushner, um, Epstein was a node that was working Donald Trump, working Donald Trump. Where he is now, he was trying to get in that space as well, to have that kind of influence. But he was moving banks. He was crashing the market in 2008, and he was still integrated with Donald Trump. Was integrated with Donald Trump in the 90s, integrated with Donald Trump up until even when they were separated, they were integrated. They were using different methods of passage between each other through conversation and gossip. Brings me to Demolition Man. We're in the Dennis Leary, the Irish guy. We're in that part. You know what I mean? Whereas right now they're trying to create this order and organization. We're in that where we need to have the graffiti and the kick up and the kind of chaos, and we're not getting the chaos. Even our people who are supposed to be the opposition, people who are supposed to be the opposition, they aren't the opposition. They're like WWE. They're the kayfabe. You know, I was watching Monday Night Raw tonight, and it was and Cody Rhodes was it Cody Rhodes at one of them, and they were doing a promo, and they're talking about this guy who they are going to fight. This guy's a piece of shit, but instead of saying this guy's a piece of shit, he is the toughest. He has been through the worst of the worst, and here he is still standing. And it's like, yeah, why don't you fillet this dude a little bit more? It's crazy because none of these people were masterminds in the conspiracy sort of way. They were really just driven and lucky with their goals, which is both horrific and impressive. Yes, but the way I'm looking at it, it's like using organics. You know what I mean? Using the organic movements, when I talk about negative space in the sense that if you ask a 5-year-old to draw you a cat, you're going to get a circle, you're going to get some triangles, you're going to get the whiskers. If you ask an artiste, put on my little hat, if you ask an artiste to paint a cat, draw a cat, you're going to see a lot of like shading around negative space where you're looking at it. When is that? I see it at the end. You know, that kind of stuff. Negative space is the creation. And what I watch when I'm watching these guys, they recruit in the negative space. They want to be adored by the people. Derek says Trump has always been a heel. But what I'm reading that as, it's like Cobblepot, the Penguin, and the Batman. He wants to be the somebody, but really people like him because of what he has. What's up, Derek? Oh, Neurodivergent jumped in. That's it. Woo! Man, I knew there'd be an audience up here at 3 a.m. I'm still trying to wrap my head around, like I say, I'm still trying to wrap my head around what in the DNC leadership, Democratic leadership, where in the money balance is looking at what, trying to figure out how to get more white Christian males. I don't understand. It doesn't make sense to me. I can't wrap my head around it. There is an untapped market of people who just, they aren't being engaged. Why are they not engaged? Because they don't see representation of them. When I hear people on Midas, Crooked, and the Bulwark use the word woke, you know what I mean? They use it just like, they talk about being, the word bling. They use it just like they're talking about, somebody being on fleek. You know what I mean? They use a buzzword like it's a slang because that's how white culture is given their stuff. All of a sudden, hey, here's a new word. Let's check this out. It's called on flake. That kind of stuff. And, you see little puff pieces, you share your little 15-second clips, you get the headlines that are shared by the Bulwark, then Tim Miller, and then, John Favreau. I'll name off the people I don't like, even though I watch them. Disenfranchised is totally the goal. But that's why something that I've noticed from playing around, between the Groks, the Chat GPTs, and the Claudes and stuff like that, and even the Google AI, is if it isn't typed, it's not searchable. Substack doesn't show up. It's almost like a blind spot. You know what I'm saying? And that's what I kind of like about it. And that's me talking about Demolition Man and Dennis Leary, because we're down in the thing, living our greasy ass life. It's not the money with the DNC. It's a failure to recognize that the Cold War era propaganda doesn't hit the same way it used to. Facts. Keep in mind, there have been 54 plus resignations and at least a dozen deaths of House representatives and senators since Trump took office. Yeah. Tig, that's money. Let me tell you why that's cash. You walked out of that joint like a Beagle boy holding a can of cash. Now, to look at all of that, the propaganda, I've been writing about this. I got 2 pieces. Names elude me now. but I'm talking to Gen Z. It says Gen Z in it. But anyway, um, white culture was given up in the 40s. The immigrants gave up their European heritage to be white. And what did you do to be white? How did you learn to be white? You learned to be white by watching TV, and you'd watch their stuff. As a matter of fact, I know Becky Lynch, the WWE wrestler, she learned to speak other languages because when she wants to, she goes to the children's, TV, and that's how she learns because they're learning language too. So watching TV has become the culture of white America. We don't have actual culture, and that's what they did in the negative space. They provided a culture of whiteness that's visible from the TV, where you can see white people being strong. You can see black people giving credence, like Candace Owens, like um, I don't watch it enough. The other black woman that's on there that has her own show, that hosts on Fox, but the black people, the Hispanic people, they give credence to the whiteness that they're producing on these television shows. And people aren't tuning into that because they're starting to be put off. I wrote a piece about how I think that Jennifer Welch should be president. She has an intellectual constituency, something that you can't manufacture. And that's where the Democrats are disconnecting. Because they aren't talking to the people. She is talking to the people. If they knew anything about marketing, they clearly don't. In marketing, you don't come up with a new idea. You watch what people are doing and you brand it. The Democratic National Committee, the DNC, the bundlers, anybody that wanted to invest in a progressive opposition should be throwing money at Jennifer Welch, developing around that, developing an organization. There are other people, but she has an intellectual constituency that you're not going to do polls. And let me tell you, polls. This whole time we fuck around with polling. We don't need polling. Polling is mint. Do you like the mint toothpaste, or would you rather the fruity? Would you like Coke, or would you like a Sprite? That's polling. And it's local. I don't know where you guys are. If it's 11 o'clock, wait. I'm trying to think. Neuro, you're like, what, Seattle? Somewhere around out over West Coast that way? We don't have the same demo. We have similar demographic. We don't have the same demographic. You know what I'm saying? Whiteness in an American sense is a bizarre concept because whiteness can only exist in contrast to everything else. Yes. Ordinarily, it's sort of like tofu. It absorbs anything it comes in contact with. So that's why Utah whiteness is different than Rhode Island whiteness. Yes. It's just different flavors, but on its own, it only exists in comparison to other cultures. Yes. It's defined by what is not, what it's not. That's why white supremacy is a stupid idea. Bada bing. Oh, wow. That's pretty cool. Portland. Yeah. Oh, Oregon. And I learned not to say Oregon. That's what we say here, but Oregon. Okay, I'm dipping out. I just wanted to kind of chirp out with my community, spend a little time. I know I'm doing a short doobie here, but it's the middle of the night, and everybody got middle of the night things. Oregon, yeah, like the guts. Makes me laugh. One time, real quick, I'll tell a story. One time, I drove a dude from Camp Pendleton. He had gotten out. We drove him home. We drove him up to Oregon. And his family had a horse ranch, and we stayed with him. We stayed in what I thought was just a back bunk, and then I woke up the next day to the window being open, sweep, and a horse's head coming in over my face, sniffing at me. It was the weirdest thing. Anyway, I'm about to get out. I'm Nick G. This is my couch. If you plant me, I grow. If you're gonna believe in something, you might as well believe in me.